was the first real sound that had ever been transmitted to a human ear by electricity.
Hi everyone and welcome to episode 5 of the Music Dissectors, recorded June 22nd, 2017. I'm your host David Holloway, and with me as always is a man who battled the Sydney Film Festival for what I believe is more than the 20th time this year. How are you, Matthew?
I am having trouble readjusting to natural light. My pupils are pinpricks. It's terrible.
For those that don't know, Matthew, when I say he's battled the Sydney Film Festival, it means, is it fair to say, Matthew, you watched every single film screened?
Well, no, nobody can do that.
Okay.
They screen so many of them simultaneously. I did. I actually did a count. I think it was 25 features, 8 documentaries, 1 animated feature, 16 animated shorts, and 4 live action shorts. It was, it's a lot of movies. A lot of movies to watch in 11 days.
Yeah. You've got better stamina than I do.
Look, I tell you, by the end of it, because it was at the State Theater, which does not have the most comfortable seats in the world. But by the end of it, my coccyx was screaming at me.
The Screaming Coccyxes. There's another band name.
You can say coccyx in a podcast, can't you?
Well, absolutely. And I think it was you that came up with the Withered Ears, or Dave Ketley last episode talked about the Withered Ears. I said it was a good band name. The Screaming Coccyxes, if it's not taken, is another good one.
Well, the plural of coccyx, as you no doubt know, being a registered nurse, is coccyges.
That's right. Well, that takes me back.
Coccyges.
The Screaming Coccyges. I like that.
I like that too. Copyright though, it's ours.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't want some other band going out there calling themselves the Screaming Coccyges.
No, not allowed. I'm going to register the domain. So, just speaking of Dave Ketley, big thanks again to Dave for jumping in last episode with our discussion on the Stooges, Raw Power. That was excellent. Had a lot of good feedback on that. So yeah, thanks, Dave. And Dave's out doing the do with Radio Birdman around Australia as we speak. So. And I know I always say it's a contrast, but it is fair to say the Stooges is one hell of a contrast to who we're talking about this episode, Matthew. So
yes.
I can't imagine Joni Mitchell ever guested with the Stooges or vice versa.
Oh man, that'd be a show. I don't believe so. No, I don't believe they moved in the same circles. I'm just trying to imagine how Iggy would react if you said, "So, would you like to go to a folk rock concert?"
Yeah, yeah, it'd be interesting. So,
there's lots of folk at my concerts. What are you talking about?
So 1974. So the thing they do have in common is they're a year apart. The discussion. So it was 1973 for Raw Power and 1974 for Court and Spark from Joni Mitchell. So it's a hell of a contrast, but it's a massive album. And as you'll hear when we talk to our guest, there's just so much to talk about with the album. So Jill Sobule is, as you'll hear, someone that I've admired for over 25 years. And I think it's fair to say, Matthew, she was just a bit passionate about Joni Mitchell.
A little bit. She clearly, Joni had an impact.
And a big impact it was, as you'll hear with Jill and more widely. So, yeah, I think you're going to enjoy this interview a lot. Jill is she's just a pleasure to speak to. Is that the best way to put it?
Yeah, it was a very, very, very enjoyable chat.
She's had one hell of a career in her own right. So, I mean, she's released 7 studio albums, 4 EPs, 3 live albums. And if you get the chance, do click on the links in the show notes, because some of her work, or I'd argue all of her work, is pretty amazing. But her 2014 release, just off the cuff, Dottie's Charms, is just an amazing piece. I actually hadn't listened to it until prior to this podcast, and it just on its own is well worth a buy. So I'll have those links there. A lot of people will tend to know her from her biggest hit single, I Kissed a Girl. And I mean, it was a great hit, but there's a hell of a lot more to Jill's work than that. So, I mean, she's been at it the whole time since 1986, and then her first album was in 1990. As you'll hear, she's worked with some amazing people, has some very forthright political perspectives. I think it's fair to say, Matthew, none of which we particularly disagreed with. I think we're on the same page there.
I just think it's time to make America great again. Frankly, it's just it's what we have. It's what we have to do.
That's right. Well, maybe on that note,
I'm not going to back away from that.
No, well, you're a man of principle.
First thing we need to do to make America great again: get rid of Donald Trump.
There you go. So let's have a listen to how Jill's going to make America great again, and enjoy the interview.
Love came to my door with a sleeping roll and a madman's soul. He thought for sure I'd seen him dancing up a river in the dark, looking for a woman to court and spy.
So, Jill, thanks again for joining us. It's a nice summer afternoon for you, at least.
Oh, it is. It is. But I was yesterday. I was in Las Vegas, and it was 115.
Yeah, that's
degrees.
Not nice.
And what's that in the rest of the world? 115.
Yeah, what is that?
It's 40s.
I have no idea.
I think it's well into the 40s.
It's not good.
Not good.
No, it's higher than I would like it to be.
Yeah, people weren't meant to live in those temperatures.
And that's 46 degrees centigrade. 46.
Yeah, that's insane.
That's not good.
No.
See,
they shut down airports at 47 degrees Celsius. So
I know they were doing it in Phoenix, but I love how we're starting with the weather.
I was about to say that's a sign of great. 3 over 30s. 3 people over 30.
You know, when it gets this cold, my room is
sad.
up.
The saddest thing about it is I really kind of get excited by that talk. That's the saddest.
That's gold. So yeah, look, thanks again for joining us, Jill. As we've already explained to our listeners, we're here to talk about Joni Mitchell's great album, Court and Spark. But before we start that, I just wanted to give you a quick anecdote, if I can. So. I don't know. Have you ever been to Australia, Jill?
I have. Do you know I was on one of the last Wait shows?
Oh, really?
Well, Wait, it's Saturday. What is it called? Wait, or not Wait.
No,
well, hey, it's Saturday.
Hey, it's Saturday.
Hey, it's Saturday. Okay.
It was one of the most amazing shows. It was the one and only time I lip synced with a band that they gave me a book of different bands, like their looks. None of them played. They were all models. Did I want a hot chick band, or did I want a hard rock looking band?
You're kidding.
Oh no, it was fantastic.
Jill, I have to emphasise that in the first 2 minutes, for our Australian listeners at least, you've just made this podcast worthwhile. That is absolute gold.
That is amazing. Something I never knew about Hey. I've learned something. I can die happy now.
That is stunning.
I picked the hot chick band, by the way.
Good.
Well, who wouldn't?
I wish they would have had a page. I wish they would have had a page of like dumpy middle-aged guys, like real estate salesmen. I would have picked that one.
Well, that
would be fantastic.
That sort of is their house band, really. at the time.
True, exactly. Come to think of it, you have a point.
So, Jill, about 25 years ago, I'm gonna bore you with an anecdote. But the reason I asked if you come to Australia is I was a university student in a small regional city called Wagga Wagga, which you may not have heard of, and was walking along. I caught the bus into town one day to go to the local music store, and there are only two of them in the city, believe it or not, and made a habit each month of going in and buying one album based on nothing but either the cover, the song choices, or just I liked the look of it overall. So I didn't know the artist, whatever. So on this day in 1990, walked past and there was an album called Things Here Are Different from someone.
Oh my gosh.
From someone called Jill Sobule. So it was one of the better blind buys, I've got to say, that I've made, and I still listen to the album today. So that's what led to really me inviting you on here. So I suppose that's a non-subtle way of saying I'm a fan anyway.
Oh, that's good.
But
good to know.
It's always good to know. So you've been a well-known musician for all of those 25 plus years since then. As hard as it can be to distill a career down to a few minutes, can you tell us a little bit about your career? So I know it's a big ask, but just basically for those that may not know you as well as I do, but just talk about your 25-year plus career, some highlights, and what you're up to at the moment too, most importantly.
Well, in short, I did that record, and it got some critical acclaim, but of course it wasn't a big seller. And then I got dropped from the label. After I actually did Joe Jackson produced the next record that they didn't like. But I just wanted to say, because I was a big Joe Jackson fan. And then I had, in 95, I had a couple hits in the mid-90s. And then was on indie labels and have always kind of, the one thing I love about Joni, and not to compare myself at all, is I love the fact that she would always experiment. Everything from, when she played with Jocko to doing the Mingus record. I think that I've always, much to the detriment of my career, but I've always liked to experiment, always play around. But the good thing is I've somehow managed to survive and not have to have a straight job. So that's in the last 25 years, I've been working on musicals in the last few years. I was very involved in politics and music. The Bernie Sanders campaign had me on for a lot to play. My kind of funny political songs. So, we have a new president, right?
Oh, yeah. And believe me, we're going to get onto that. There's absolutely no doubt about that.
Can I just tell you how much I love your president for making fun of him on that tape?
And the best thing about that, Jill, is he's a very unfunny guy generally. So we're particularly impressed down here.
He really, really is very unfunny.
Isn't it? Yeah. Oh, my God. We were in hysterics.
I mean, we might as well segue into that before we get on to Joni. So, I mean, about your new president, I mean, when I was doing the research for this interview, I hadn't actually run across your song release from last year, Our America Back, and it's made my month as far as just what a great song it is. But it's just,
I agree.
It's full and frank and joyful, and was also done, most importantly, before he was even elected. So a lot of the stuff you talk about in that song has come to pass, but it hadn't at that stage.
Yeah, but it was brewing. It definitely was brewing, and the anti-immigrant sentiment. And, I must say, can I just put a non sequitur in here?
Please do.
Is that, some of the more prejudiced people are upset by the wave of people from South America or Mexico or from the Middle East. But I know a lot of people that are really upset about, especially in LA, of the influx of all the Australians coming over here in LA. They're taking over all the surf shops. It's amazing. No, I just have to say, I just did a whole recording session with Australian musicians last week. So
That's
Wow.
they're taking over my city.
It is time to build a wall.
We have to build that.
Or put an ocean between our countries or something. I don't know. There's got to be some solution.
I don't know, but I love actually that Trump has brought you. You guys are like one of our enemies now. I love that.
And yeah, that's very true. And I mean, how was the song received, Jill, when you released it, and since then? I mean, you know, it is fairly frank. Did you have a lot of reaction to it when it came out?
Oh yeah, and I got tons of hate mail and trolls. It was amazing. I never had that before.
You make that sound like it's a good thing.
Well, if someone was going to say something like, "Oh, you know, I would be upset if someone said like, "Oh, you look have you gained some weight?" Or you know, we don't like your new record as well. But when they come and call me a commie dyke Jew, it's so over the top that I get kind of tickled.
Fair enough.
You know, you can't take that
you
personal.
can't take that seriously at all, can you?
No. It kind of tickles me because it's so over the top.
Yeah.
And I mean, I will link to the song in the show notes for our listeners because it is well worth a listen. It's and it's obvious you're playing with a bunch of
terrific
musicians.
video.
Yeah, it is terrific video. A lot of happiness enjoying it, which is great.
It's funny because it's such in a lot of ways such a pessimistic song, and an angry song, and yet, you know, you watch it and it's like Frente, or it's like Fairground Attraction. It's like some of that sort of mid-90s. My God, this is so incredibly optimistic. This is so happy, and yet if you listen to the lyrics, you know, there's this sort of cynical undertone to it. I love it. I love it.
No, thanks. You know, I was debating between that, Joni, or there was a John Prine album I loved that my older brother gave me. And he was able to have these little story songs of the most depressing stories. But if you know, with this kind of happy music, like the one Stone about, you know, the Vietnam vet coming back as a junkie. But it has, for some reason, the happier it is, the more... the more kind of depressing it is. It's great, you know, when you juxtapose that.
Yeah.
And that's probably a perfect segue to Joni Mitchell. So
yeah,
we are talking about her 1974 album, Court and Spark. So probably to start off with, Jill, can you, in the broader terms, tell us what your memories are of hearing that album for the first time and the impact that it had on you?
And I was like 13 or 14, and I was over a friend's older sister's house, had the record. And, you know, I was a big music freak, but it was always mostly the music for me. And this was the first album I remember and totally focusing on the lyrics. And it was literature to me. I'd never heard anyone say the things she did in a song. Plus, sonically, that album is so gorgeous. It just blew me away in so many ways. And the thing that was interesting is that, you know, here I was, 13-year-old girl, and the sophistication of the lyrics, I don't know why or how I related to them. But you're even talking about the kind of little funny jab, like when she goes, why would a 13-year-old be so into the lyric, dreaming of the pleasure I'm going to have watching your hairline recede, my vain darling. You know, but somehow I knew that was incredible, and I connected to that.
Settle loving's bound to make me crazy. I can't find my goodness, I lost my heart. Oh, sour grapes, because I lost my heart.
I need to plead my ignorance here, Jill, in that I hadn't actually listened to this album from start to finish prior to you confirming it was the one you wanted to speak about, whereas, Matthew, I know you've listened to it a number of times, and I assumed that this was one you grew up with.
You know, I grew up in Canada in the 70s, and Joni Mitchell and Leonard Cohen and you know, other Canadian songwriters were very much kind of part of the atmosphere. You kind of breathed them in. You didn't have to go out of your way to find Joni Mitchell to listen to because it was playing at somebody's house all the time. And so, yeah, I mean, I was familiar, you know, as a kid. You know, everybody had, you know, Big Yellow Taxi. Everybody had Blue. It was an omnipresent thing. So, you know, when you said Court and Spark for this, I thought, well, that's an interesting one, because something I didn't know is that this is actually Joni Mitchell's biggest selling album.
Mm.
I didn't know that either.
I didn't realize it, because to me, it's not one of the ones that I think of. If I think Joni Mitchell, you know, I think Big Yellow Taxi, or I think Blue. I think, you know, one of these iconic covers that everybody had in their house at that time. I don't think of Court and Spark, but apparently this is the biggest selling one. So that actually surprised me to learn. Mm. And it's quite different to those earlier albums, you know, because it's got the much more jazz fusion sort of edge to it than the earlier albums. So it's not the one that I immediately think of if I think of Joni Mitchell.
Yeah, you think of her dulcimer albums like Blue and Ladies of the Canyon. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, those earlier ones, all the stuff that you know, Judy Collins covered everything on, and that kind of thing, you know. Right.
Gorgeous record.
Yeah. And the reason I've mentioned my own ignorance is that I've had the unique experience of listening to an album 43 years later that I had never heard before, and just going back to your point, Jill, about the lyrics, is that's the thing that has stood out for me the most, that the power of the lyrics right from the very first song, as far as love came to my door with a sleeping roll and a madman's soul. He thought for sure I'd seen him dancing up a river in the dark, looking for a woman to court and spark. I mean, just from the very outset, it packs a punch. And the band you mentioned, I mean, I just can't get over the quality of the production.
Yeah, the production was beautiful. And you listen to records a couple years earlier, and there is a difference. Like I think this was kind of the high point of that kind of, well, you know, it was the you know what, the other thing I miss nowadays is looking at who played drums, who played the pedal steel, who played on all of these things, and it was like the most amazing musicians at the time in LA that played on that record. She always was good at that.
Yeah, I mean, she pulled together. I mean, it was LA Express were the underpinnings of most of the songs, and yeah, just amazing musicians. And you can tell. I was actually unaware of that as well. Just listening, I thought these musicians are tight. They've obviously played together a long time, and the instrumentation is just brilliant. And then, yeah, looked it up and realised that's why, that they're a jazz outfit with a lot of experience.
Yeah, I mean, her previous albums had been much more in that sort of folk rock strain, where a kind of a rawness or an amateur edge was a desirable thing. It was a thing that you aimed for. You know, the most polished folk rock album sounds like something that's been put together in somebody's backyard shed.
Right.
Where this,
which is great too.
Absolutely, it's part of what makes that appeal so much. You hear the background sounds and stuff. You hear the studio. We're here. There's definitely a focus on we're making you listen to this music. You know, you're not listening to the atmosphere around it anymore. This is about the music. It's not about we're not pretending to be in a club. We're pretending to be in your head, kind of thing. Which is kind of a jazz approach in a lot of ways.
Right.
As opposed to a folk approach.
Right. And it's that fine line of either being gorgeous and beautiful or being, overwrought. and why punk rock started. But I think this was before it got wretched and over the top. I think this is such a beautiful, beautiful record. And things like Down to You, the orchestration and the woodwinds and that.
Go down to the pickup station, craving warmth and beauty. You settle for less than fascination. A few drinks later, you're not so choosy. When the closing lights strip off the shadows on this strange new flesh you found, clutching the night to you like a fig leaf, you hurry to the blackness and the blankets to lay down an impression and your loneliness. In the morning, there are lovers in the street. They look so high. You brush against a stranger and you both apologize. Old friends seem indifferent. You must have brought that on. Old bonds have broken down. Love is gone. Ooh, love is gone. Written on your spirit, this sad song.
I remember on that song when all of a sudden it stops and it goes, "Love is gone." That the chorus of angels singing, "Love is gone," and I just wondered as a teenage girl why such a depressing lyrical album had so much appeal to me.
And do you feel like you've answered that question since, Jill?
Yeah, I think that. I mean, a lot of this comes from, as opposed to her early records, this one it's a very mature record as far as her, it feels like she's been through it. She's been through some bad relationships, and there's a certain cynicism. And I don't know what makes us listen to those.
Because we've all been through bad relationships. I suppose at 13 we usually haven't, have we?
Yeah, yeah. You want to hear something? This guy Robbie Naiman, right, who broke up with me in 6th grade. We went out for 2 weeks, and I hadn't seen him since. And he Facebooked me last month for the first time. It says, "I hope you're still not mad at me," and I wrote him back. So now you come crawling back. But I think that it is. I mean, that period, especially, for girls and boys, I think 7th grade was so horrible. 7th and 8th grade are horrible, horrible times especially for girls. I don't know about boys, but I think there is something about depressing lyrics or music that gives us comfort that we're not alone.
Absolutely. And I mean, you mentioned Down to You, Jill, so that's obviously a track that's resonated with you. Let's jump into a couple of the tracks. So if you had to list a top 3 or 5 on the album, what are the ones that you still go back to now, in an ideal world would cover if the opportunity arose and so on?
Oh, I think I always loved Down to You. I think that was the one that I would always play over and over. And I think Help Me, I Think I'm Falling in Love with Again, that, because it was just so, my God, the music and that lyric, it just right away, it just tells you what it is. That was kind of brilliant. But Down to You just had this, I think it was the orchestration, and it took you on a story, like your other fellow Canadian, Leonard Cohen. I mean, she's a storyteller.
Yeah.
And to me, Down to You, just that and This Train, they just felt like they were narratives.
And they very much are.
They set the thing.
You mentioned Help Me there. Do you watch South Park at all?
I used to watch it all the time. It's great.
So there's a rather poignant episode of South Park in which Cartman is bullying, as always, the character of Butters, if you're familiar.
Yeah, I love
And
Butters.
and Butters is sitting in his bedroom and he's singing "Help Me" to himself.
Oh.
And it's just one of the saddest things in the history of TV.
Oh.
See, you got tears in your eyes now. Just imagining this little cartoon boy who's being picked on by the fat kid, and he's singing Joni Mitchell.
Yeah, it's so great. You know, another thing about Joni is I will never ever cover one of her songs. I just think I don't know. It just seems sacrilege. And how do you do that? And also, who wants to learn all those tunings? Jesus.
Yeah, it's a trick, isn't it?
But a friend of mine, do you know the band X? They were one of the seminal punk. So John Doe, who was singer and bass player, one of my friends, he does a version of A Case of You, Joni Mitchell's. And when a guy sings a Joni Mitchell song, and he does it in this gorgeous crooning voice, and this punk rocker singing a Joni, and it'll make you swoon so much.
I'm going to have to chase that one down now.
Oh, It's so beautiful. But
see if you can link to that in the program notes, David.
I shall. And you mentioned orchestration overall with Court and Spark, Jill. I mean, one of the things that stood out to me, and I mentioned it briefly with them using the group LA Express, is it seems to have been a pretty driven decision to keep the instrumentation limited to what now we'd think of as the basics. So acoustic guitar, bass, drums, piano, with the woodwinds, reed and brass, added in sparingly but effectively in the album. It's one of those arts, Jill, that has been lost, I'd argue, over recent decades as far as keeping it to that base set of instruments. Do you think it was an active choice Joni Mitchell made at the time, or was one driven by necessity?
Probably a little bit of both. Probably the first, but that's the way they saw it. On the other hand, that there was a certain joy of now you can have 1,000 tracks and play back and forth with them. No, I think it was still those days of let's have this session band. It'd be interesting to know if they did all the basic tracks and everything all together.
Yeah, that was what I was wondering as well, and I haven't been able to find the answer to that, but I'm assuming they did as a jazz group, but that's a big assumption.
I think so, but it is an assumption, but I would maybe bet on it. Maybe, you know what? That's a good thing. Maybe I'll find out from people. I know some old timers.
Yeah,
session players. That's a good thing to find out.
I mean, this was the album. She took a year off. I mean, up until 72, she'd released an album every year, and then she took a year off. She said, "I want to get the next one right. I want to do this one really polished, really, really well." She took a year off, and then it was 74 that she put out Court and Spark. After having spent a lot of time perfecting it, getting it to exactly the point that she wanted to. So I'm inclined. I don't know whether it was a matter of do it all at once or whether it was add as needed. But I'm certainly inclined to think that what she ended up with was exactly what she was after, and not something that she was, as you say, driven to by necessity. She had the time, she had the means to make the album that she really, really wanted, and she had, and she did. She produced the product that she was trying to produce.
Yeah, I agree.
So she hadn't taken this long to produce an album before.
No, and this one, like you said, this was different than the last ones. This was. I think she was thinking sonically in a different way.
Yeah. Oh, there'd been this kind of jazz edge sort of floating around the margins, the periphery of a lot of what she'd done earlier. In terms of the vocal styling, in terms of, as you say, the tunings. It's very atypical for folk or for folk rock or certainly for pop. She's doing stuff that's very different lyrically and sonically, and I think what she wanted to do here was say, okay, I want to actually explore jazz a bit in a much more thorough way than she had before.
Right. I just wonder if there were some folk purists like there were with Dylan in Newport. I wonder if there were people who disliked her direction.
I think, from my reading, there was a lot of disagreement throughout her whole career on that. And you mentioned Dylan there, Jill. That's one of the most fascinating things she's been quoted as saying, which is, I like a lot of Bob's songs. Musically, he's not very gifted, which is something I have to admit.
Which is so true.
It is absolutely true. Yeah.
God, I know she said some things. She said sometimes some kind of bitter, snarky things in her last, in the last years, I think.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Dylan's also been mean to her.
I know. Folk wars, like the early rap years. It was like...
There's a story just on the subject of Dylan that when Court and Spark was about to come out, Joni Mitchell was over at David Geffen's house, and Bob Dylan was there, and she played Court and Spark as it was then for Dylan and Geffen, and Dylan fell asleep.
Hysterical.
And she reckons that he did that deliberately. Just to be mean, he fell asleep on me.
So great.
She could be right too.
That is so petty.
I have a song called Heroes about all my heroes and how they can be assholes.
Mm-hmm.
And I have one of the lines in Heroes, Dylan was so mean to Donovan in that movie. Remember what a jerk he was in his movie? And what was it? Don't Look Back. What was his? Don't
Look Back is the Pennebaker documentary.
Yeah,
I don't remember Donovan in that.
Yeah. Donovan came to say, hey, I'm a big fan, and he was such a dick to him. My God. Yeah.
I'll have to rewatch it. The thing we're diverting here, but the thing that always stands out for me about Don't Look Back was the scene where the British journalist is talking to Joan Baez and he has no idea who she is. Like, are you Mr. Dylan's girlfriend or wife or? Oh my God!
Amazing! I love that movie.
So, I mean, Joni Mitchell, you mentioned Jill being outspoken. She certainly has been over the years. So, including some interesting criticism she made of the 1960s, boomers and counterculture movement. So is it fair to say Joni Mitchell's approach as far as being forthright on this stuff has had a bearing on your own work?
I don't know. I think mostly it was that here, growing up, and there wasn't that many role models for women other than just the singers in the band.
Mm-hmm.
And so Joni, not only that, but her songwriting and telling a story and being poetic and experimental. I mean, that was pretty. There weren't many role models.
No.
For me, and there still isn't in a way. I mean, it's better now, but.
I mean, it is better now to some extent, but I mean, who would you argue are today's Joni Mitchells, Jill? Present company accepted, of course.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it's going to be interesting, like, who are going to be we could say the 60s and 70s, the Jonis and Back to Canada, Neil Young, and who in the last 10 years or last 15 years are going to be the people that we talk about 30 years from now as iconic, not just as that they were famous, but that they were, very special and amazing musicians and songwriters. I don't know that yet.
No.
I
do have a request, though, from, say, the 90s and onwards. I've always dreamt of yourself, Suzanne Vega and Amy Mann doing some sort of collaboration, if you could sort that out at some stage.
I sure like those two, that's for sure.
That would be an interesting combination of voices.
Oh, you know what I was going to say back to Joni? I love it, is that one of my favorite concerts I ever saw in my whole life, and was Joni's Shadows and Light tour.
Okay.
And it was at Red Rocks, and that was, you talk about the kind of jazz thing she had, but that was with Jocko and Wayne Shorter and the Brecker brothers, and it's this incredible Pat Metheny. It was just she took this and she brought these people out live. And beforehand, I never saw the one where she had the Tom Scott and the LA Express, but I would have loved to seen her tour with this album.
Did she tour with Court and Spark?
I don't know. She had that. What was the live album that she had after this?
Was Miles of Isles, or I think it was something like that. Anyway, yeah, it was the album after this one. Yeah.
Right. She must have. Yeah. I wonder if there's any footage of it, like there is of the Shadows and Light.
I'm just doing a quick Google search now, and I can't find not anything contemporary. No.
Wow.
She performed in April at a benefit concert, and then in August, and twice at the Chorale Club, accompanied by Neil Young. So no, there doesn't seem to have been a tour around Court and Spark.
That's so interesting.
Isn't that strange?
I guess I'm trying to think if she toured with albums. I mean, Shadows and Light seems like it was a tour that I don't know if it was a tour to record the tour as opposed to for a record.
Yeah.
I think it was a little tour. Jeez, wow.
And so, Jill, I mean, any other big standouts for you from that album? Any of the real contrasts that still have stuck with you? I mean, for me, the Raised on Robbery is one of those real contrasting points in the album that I love, and also Twisted as the final song, which, Matthew, I think you mentioned was pulled through from a previous recording.
Yeah, it was actually recorded for the Roses, but she felt that it was too much of a departure for the Roses, so she actually held that over, and put it on Court and Spark.
Out of my head, the way he described it, he said I'd be better dead than live. I didn't listen to his jive. I knew all along that he was all wrong, and I knew that he thought I was crazy, but I'm not, don't know. My analyst told me that I was right out of my head. He said I'd need treatment, but I'm not that easily led. He said I was the type that was most inclined, when out of his sight, to be out of my mind. And he thought I was nuts. No more ifs or ands or buts.
Wow, and that was a Hendrix and Ross song? She didn't write that song.
No, she didn't write that. It's a cover. I can't remember who
told me. It's Kendricks and Ross or something. Annie something. Their stuff is really fun.
Annie Ross, yeah.
Annie Ross, yeah.
To a tenor saxophone solo by the same name by Wardell Gray.
Huh.
So yeah, I love Twisted. I got to say, it's actually. I know it's a strange thing to say because it wasn't actually recorded for this album, but it's my favorite song on the album.
That's fantastic.
It's just such a cool song. It has Cheech and Chong on it.
I think Bette Midler actually recorded it too.
Yes.
In one of her
yeah, she did. She did a cover of it. Yeah.
How funny. I think that one of the other songs was all the people at this party, they got a lot of stuff. Because I was anxious going to parties, and so somehow I related to Joni of wanting to hide and wish you could laugh it off. So, and again, she a more adult kind of narrative of all the people at the party and the different kinds of people, and so I related to that one.
People at this party, they've got a lot of style. They've got stamps of many countries. They've got passport smiles. Some are friendly, some are cutting, some are watching it from the wings. Some are standing in the center, giving to get something. Photo beauty gets points running down. She's got a rose in her teeth and a lampshade crown. One minute she's so happy, then she's crying on someone's knee, saying, laughing and crying, you know it's the same release.
Jill, did the 13-year-old Jill ever think that she'd be actually going to people's houses and being the centre of the party playing house concerts?
No, that would have been so strange. No, that's that's pretty amazing, actually.
And you, I'm assuming you enjoy doing those, but how are they different as far as preparing for a live gig where you've got such an intimate audience versus what would be a more traditional gig?
Oh, I really like it, especially when it's inside and where there's good acoustics and I don't have to plug in, and it just there's something that's just so casual and sweet. And there's different kinds of performers. Like Joni would hate these, I think. Joni would, I think, how there's certain performers who they like space between them and the audience, or they like the lights off, or they like to be performing on a stage, whereas I kind of like being right there and looking at people in their eyes, and I think that is not every artist would like that. Now, for some reason, I don't think Joni would.
No. Well, that was going to be my next question. I'd had that assumption as well. I just think that'd be a little bit too confronting.
No, I don't think she had that kind of, not to say bad, I don't think she was friendly in that way.
Yeah.
And that's not saying anything bad. It's just how different people are. Like, people get away from me,
Well, I think...
Although I have... Yeah?
No, you're right. I was going to say, and I think her doing a house concert and seeing Bob Dylan asleep on the couch just would make for a good vibe.
She would not like that. Why do I love that story? I love Bob Dylan stories, by the way. They're the best. Friends that have worked for him or had sessions with him, they've always got great stories.
I assume you've heard the one just from the past few weeks where he actually played Freebird towards the end of one of his shows.
Oh, you've got to love that. Oh.
So I don't know whether some wit actually did shout it out as per the stereotype, but he did play it.
I love that. I love that completely. I didn't meet Joni, but I knew her. I knew her ex, the bass player, who produced all her records, and so I did get to shake hands with the guy that slept with Joni.
Yeah. That's a hell of a good claim to fame. And, she's essentially disappeared from public view now.
Because her health issues.
Yeah.
Sick.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
She was at the Grammys a couple of months ago, but that's about the last time she's been seen in public.
And how much did she smoke? Amazing.
Well, all of it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, she's just something amazing. And I always love when younger people or younger artists, all of a sudden they discover her. There's something pretty amazing, like, it's like my nephews when they were 16 and they were like, have you ever heard of the Ramones or the Clash?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
It's pretty hard to rebel, isn't it?
It really is. How do you rebel these days? God.
I'm gonna really annoy you, Dad. I'm gonna put on Black Sabbath. It's like, oh yeah, cool. Turn it up, man.
I know. Well, you guys, I have to run. I have an appointment, and
No
I can
problems.
talk to you all day.
No, look, really appreciate the time.
I've loved the chat. It's been great.
Yeah, it's been absolutely great. Thank you so much for doing this. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you on something other than Hey Hey It's Saturday Down Under in the future.
I know.
I so have to find that video.
You know what? We need to find that. And for some reason, I've been hanging out with a lot of people from Down Under. And I did a song with, you know who Ben Lee is?
Oh, absolutely.
So Ben was working with me on a couple songs, and then for some reason, it's just maybe that's why he brought all his Australian friends to play on a couple tracks. So I hope to get down there. I really do.
He was sitting in the lounge of the Empire Hotel. He was drinking for diversion. He was thinking for himself. A little money riding on the maple leaves. Along comes a lady in lacy sleeves.
So there we have it, Matthew. I would have loved to have watched Jill perform at Bernie Sanders' campaign events.
I am very impressed. That was a very fun conversation, and what I've seen of her videos, she looks like a very fun performer. I am about to, as soon as we stop recording here, I'm going to go scour YouTube and find her on Hey Hey It's Saturday because I have to see that.
I tell you what, if Jill was a less entertaining interviewee, I would nearly have considered stopping recording after that anecdote and going, "There's a wrap. That's the best episode we've done."
Yeah.
I just can't believe there's a catalogue of band types. That just blows my mind.
Oh my goodness. I'll have the hot chicks, thank you.
Yeah. It's just, yeah. I mean, I wish they had that. Now, imagine the variety you could pick from. You know, I'll have the Bogan band. I'll have there'd be all sorts of options.
I never knew that, but hey.
Yeah.
I knew they sing.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think from memory, Doc Neeson refused to lip sync on Hey Hey. They actually had him sort of basically playing in an adjacent studio so he could be playing live.
Yeah. No.
Without destroying their audience. But that aside from that, I knew that they lip synced on Hey Hey, but I didn't know that like the backing band were just people you picked out of a catalog.
Yeah. What
that
a
blew
job.
my mind. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, look, those were the days. So yeah, that was gold. But aside from that, yeah, it was just great talking to Jill, and yeah, I wish she would come down to Australia. And I'm dead serious about the Vega Man Sobule collaboration. That would just about make my life.
Yeah, that's a combination of voices I'd like to hear.
And I won't deny that I'm chasing the other two of those trio for interviews. I'm going to do it. I'm going to achieve it if it kills me.
Wow. I understand that as a certain international singer-songwriter of some acclaim is coming to Australia in December. So perhaps we should be trying to rope him in.
I wish. Yeah, look, if I'd known 4 years ago.
Have we had any left-handed bass guitarists on the show so far?
Not yet. So he could be the first.
For the sake of diversity, we need to have a left-handed bass guitarist.
All right, leave it with me. I need to have started 4 years ago to foster that, and even then it'd still be a no. But
yeah. But you can't hurt to try.
Yeah, and I looked at the prices, Matthew. He's not cheap. Not that I expected him to be.
He is not an inexpensive ticket. No. And yeah, 400 and something bucks for the diamond, and that's not even the VIP level.
And what does the diamond get you without going off on too much of a tangent? I assume very good seats.
I assume that the seating charts haven't been published yet, so we don't know. We don't know what diamond level is. But apparently the VIP level gets you the front row.
Right.
If you buy VIP, you get front row.
Yeah.
So diamond doesn't get you the front row. For $400, you don't get to be in the front row.
Yeah, that's big money, isn't it? But he needs it. Needs it, the poor bugger.
Exactly. Think about the McCartneys.
So there we go. I call that a wrap. We will be back in another few weeks. So we do have a couple of people actually lined up as next guests. So for those that are wondering about the regularity of schedule, it really does depend on nailing people down to particular time zones, and Matthew and I have been able to get together as well. So it's nearly impossible.
I was watching movies, so
that's right. It's nearly impossible to make it a regular fortnightly one. Just be aware that we are always actively working on the next episode, and there will be one. I'm assuming at this stage in 3 weeks' time. But in the meantime, if you'd like to offer an opinion, suggestion, or even offer yourself up as a guest to review an album you love, please don't hesitate to email us at contact@themusicweek.net or visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/Music Dissectors. All the previous episodes of the show are on iTunes, and we're also on Stitcher and TuneIn, and all episodes are on our website at themusicweek.net. Matthew?
Especially get in touch with us if you are an entomologist. We
still
really do want to look for an entomologist to talk to.
Matthew, thank you as always. Couldn't have done it without you. Well, I could have, but it wouldn't have been the same.
You could.
Yeah, wouldn't have been the same. Particularly with Joni Mitchell, I was very much feeling I needed someone that had my back, that knew a little bit more than me. So, much appreciated.
As I say, in Canada, you can't not listen to Joni Mitchell. Or look, in Canada in the 70s at least. I don't know about now.
Well, it'd be like
in Canada in Canada in the 70s, it was avoiding Joni Mitchell was like trying to avoid oxygen.
Yeah,
you couldn't do it.
No, absolutely. So yes, we'll be back in a few weeks, and as always, in the meantime, find a new album to love.